The city lights hummed 20 floors below, but inside the apartment, the only sound was the rhythmic tap of a thumb against glass. Ethan sat in the corner of the sofa, the blue light from his phone carving deep lines into his face. It was the kind of silence that settled in the bones after a long work week. On his desk, a stack of project reports sat unfinished, symbols of a career that demanded everything and gave back only more work. He looked at the screen again. The profile picture of a stranger blinked back at him, unmoving. He had spent the last 3 years building a reputation that commanded respect in every boardroom, yet he could not name a single person who knew what he took in his coffee. The phone vibrated, a sharp, metallic sound that cut through the quiet. He ignored the notification. He stood up and walked to the window, watching the stream of headlights move like blood through the veins of the city. He was the architect of his own schedule, the master of his own accounts, but the empty space on the other side of the room felt heavier than any deadline he had ever faced. The screen glowed, waiting for an input that felt increasingly pointless. Ethan sat back down. His thumb resumed its path left, then left again. The motion was mechanical, a flick of the wrist that required no thought. He moved through dozens of faces in minutes. Each one was a brief flicker of potential that vanished before he could even process a name. He felt the tension in his forearm, a dull ache born from an hour of mindless repetition. Every swipe felt like a tally mark on a wall, a record of effort spent and nothing gained. He paused on one profile, read 3 lines of a generic bio, and exhaled a long, jagged breath. The glowing rectangle in his hand was no longer a window to the world. It was a treadmill. He watched the battery percentage drop 3%, 2% a countdown to total darkness. He ignored the sudden urge to set the device aside. The habit had become a vacuum, pulling his attention into a loop of curated images and empty promises. His eyes burned from the constant flicker of the interface. He looked for a reason to stay, but the screen offered only another stranger, another blank space, and another opportunity for his thumb to move left. Edan. The cycle was tightening, and the hope he once held was being replaced by a heavy, mechanical fatigue that settled into his chest. The interface refreshed, serving up new faces, but the result remained static. He sent a message, a small attempt at connection, and watched the cursor blink. Minutes turned into hours. The response never came. He moved to the next, typed a question, and received a one-word reply that killed the conversation before it could breathe. It was a digital landfill. He was sifting through piles of discarded interest and half-hearted effort, hunting for gold where only trash existed. Every ghosted message left a hollow feeling in his gut. He stared at the screen, cataloging the failures, the dead-end threads, the abrupt departures, the silence that followed his best efforts. It was as if he were digging through a mountain of refuse, hoping to find something precious, only to find his own time evaporating into the void. The sheer volume of these non-interactions began to weigh on him. He realized he was not connecting with people. He was merely performing an automated ritual of rejection. The light of the phone felt colder now, clinical and detached. He looked at the list of stalled conversations, dozens of ghosts floating in his history. Each one was a reminder of wasted energy. The landfill was deep, and he was sinking into it, one swipe at a time, searching for a treasure that simply was not there. Ethan went to swipe left again, but his thumb stalled midair. The screen displayed a stranger, yet he did not see the face. He saw only the reflection of his own aimlessness. A memory surfaced, sharp and unbidden. Napoleon Hill. The principle of definite purpose. He had been treating his life like a lottery, hoping for a winning ticket without ever defining what the prize should be. He looked at the glowing device. It was a tool, yet he had been using it like a crutch. The realization hit with the force of a physical weight. His failures were not the fault of the app, the people, or the digital void. They were the direct result of his own lack of direction. He had been searching for a fantasy, a vague shadow of a partner, without knowing his own map. He stared at the blue light, no longer seeing a landfill, but a mirror reflecting his own lack of intent. The frustration he felt moments ago shifted into a cold, clear focus. If success demands a definite purpose, then his current search was a guaranteed failure. He had been wandering in a dark room, complaining that he could not find the door, while refusing to turn on the light. The cycle was broken by the sheer weight of this clarity. He was done being a scavenger. Ethan looked down at the phone, its surface smudged with his own fingerprints. It felt small, fragile, and entirely insufficient. He did not lock it. He did not check for notifications. He simply placed it face down on the table, the blue light vanishing against the dark wood. The silence of the room felt different now. It was no longer heavy with frustration, but expectant. He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor, and moved toward the desk in the corner. His hand brushed against a stack of papers before finding the leather-bound notebook he had ignored for months. He pulled it into the center of the workspace. The paper was crisp, untouched, and smelled faintly of dust. He sat down and opened the cover. The sound of the spine cracking was loud in the quiet apartment, a definitive, final noise. He smoothed the first page flat with his palm, feeling the texture of the grain under his skin. He reached for a pen, his fingers tightening around the barrel, and pressed the tip against the blank white surface. He was no longer waiting for the algorithm to decide his future. He was taking the pen, the paper, and the control back into his own hands. The transition from the screen to the page was complete. The ink flowed dark and steady. Ethan marked the top of the page with 3 distinct headers, underlining each with a sharp singular stroke. Values, intentions, goals. He did not rush. He closed his eyes, stripping away the noise of past encounters and the ghosting that had plagued his screen. Under values, he wrote words he had never dared to prioritize before. Integrity, patience, and a hunger for self-improvement. He paused, the pen hovering, as the weight of his own honesty settled into the paper. Moving to intentions, he discarded the superficial search for a trophy. Instead, he defined his aim. He wanted a partner who viewed life as a project to be built, not a status to be maintained. His hand moved faster now, the rhythm of his thoughts matching the scratching of the nib. Finally, under goals, he mapped out the life he wanted to sustain, a shared trajectory, not just a shared hobby. As he wrote the final word, the room felt less like a container for his loneliness and more like a studio for his future. The aimless scavenger was gone. In his place sat a man who finally knew exactly what he was looking for, and more importantly, why. Ethan turned his attention back to the device. The screen had dimmed, but a single tap brought the profile page back into view. He read the bio aloud, his voice flat and detached. It was a collection of safe, crowd-pleasing phrases, a carefully curated mask designed to offend no one and attract everyone. He saw how hollow it looked now. He scrolled through the list of interests he had once fabricated to appear more approachable. Each line felt like a weight he had been carrying for no reason. He tapped the edit button. His thumb hovered over the backspace key. He did not hesitate. He held the key down, watching the words disappear one by one until the text box was empty, blinking with a steady, expectant rhythm. The cursor pulsed against the white background, a small, rhythmic heartbeat in the digital void. He locked the screen and set the phone aside again, not with the frustration of the past, but with the quiet satisfaction of a clean slate. The artificial version of himself was gone. The space was finally cleared, leaving him facing the reality of his own intentions, waiting for the right words to fill the void. Ethan opened the app again. The blank white box waited. He began to type, not for an audience, but for himself. His fingers moved with a different cadence than before. He laid out his core beliefs with brutal, unvarnished simplicity. He wrote about the necessity of personal growth and the value of shared, honest labor. He stopped. He read the lines back. It felt dangerous. This was no longer a game of shadows. It was an invitation that left him completely exposed. He stared at the blue button at the bottom of the screen. For a second, the fear of rejection tightened his chest. He imagined the silence that might follow, the potential for being ignored because he refused to blend in. He took a steady breath, closed his eyes, and tapped the screen. The text locked into place. He set the phone face down on the table, his heart hammering against his ribs. The message was out. He was no longer hidden behind a curated facade. He was standing in the open, waiting to be seen for the first time in his life. The apartment felt different, quieter, as if the air itself was waiting for a response. The first day passed in a rhythm of constant checking. Every vibration of the phone sent a jolt of anticipation through him, but each time, it was only a notification for an update or a news alert. He left the phone on the desk, face up, as if the physical act of watching it would force the algorithm to yield a result. By the third day, the initial thrill had curdled into a cold, heavy restlessness. He began to pace the apartment. He caught himself staring at the screen for minutes, questioning the words he had chosen. Was his honesty too rigid? Had he priced himself out of the market by refusing to play the game? He navigated to his own profile, reading the lines he had written with such conviction days ago. They felt stark now, stripped of the warmth he hoped they would project. A week arrived with no matches. The silence from the digital void grew loud, pressing against his resolve. He sat in the dark, the phone glowing dimly in his hand, a beacon of failed expectations. Doubt clawed at the edges of his commitment. He could revert to the old patterns, soften the edges of his profile, and rejoin the crowd of shadows. He gripped the phone, his knuckles pale, and stared at the empty notification feed. He did not change a single word. The notification sound cut through the silence like a blade. It was a sharp, singular ping that vibrated against the wood of the table. Ethan did not move for a full second. He stared at the screen, his breath hitched in his throat. He tapped the icon. A new profile appeared. The name was Sophia. He scanned the screen, expecting the usual curated gloss, but found none. No filters, no staged backdrops, no carefully crafted puns. The photos were simple, taken in natural light, showing a person who looked comfortable in their own skin. The bio was sparse, written in short, declarative sentences that mirrored his own recent shift in perspective. It was raw, unedited, and carried an undeniable weight of truth. He scrolled down, his thumb hovering over the screen, searching for a hidden agenda or a sign of irony. He found nothing but clarity. The connection was instantaneous, a recognition of intent that bypassed the usual digital performance. His heart rate spiked, a rhythmic thrum against his chest. He set the phone down and then picked it back up, his hands steadying as he realized the gamble had finally yielded a result. This was not a game. He tapped the chat icon, the cursor blinking in the empty box, waiting for the first word. The cursor blinked, a steady, rhythmic pulse that seemed to count down the seconds of his life. He typed, "Hey, how was your day?" and immediately backspaced. The words felt hollow, like dust in his mouth. He leaned back, the chair groaning under his weight, and looked at the wall. This was the moment of decision. He could sink back into the familiar, safe rhythm of casual banter, or he could risk the silence for the sake of substance. He rested his thumbs on the glass screen. He didn't want a companion for a weekend. He wanted an architect for a future. He began to type, each letter deliberate and firm. His thumb hovered over the backspace key one last time, but he pulled it away. He typed, "I value honesty and growth. What are you building?" The question sat on the screen, stripped of all pretense and armor. It was a mirror held up to the digital void. His heart hammered a frantic beat against his ribs, a physical manifestation of the risk he had just taken. He pressed the send icon. The message vanished into the ether. He did not lock the phone. He held it in both hands, his knuckles white, watching the empty space where her reply would either manifest or remain a ghost. The response did not take minutes. It appeared in the window before his pulse could even settle. A single, crisp notification chime signaled the change. He tapped the alert, and the screen flooded with text. Sophia had not offered a polite pleasantry. She had responded to the weight of his question with a directness that matched his own. The hollow ghosting of his past weeks evaporated, replaced by a rapid-fire sequence of thoughts and inquiries. He sat up, pushing the chair back, his eyes darting across the glass as the conversation deepened. They bypassed the standard digital rituals. No curated small talk, no stalling. Every message she sent anchored a new point of resonance, forcing him to discard his rehearsed responses and engage with raw, immediate honesty. The phone grew warm in his hands as the exchange gathered momentum. It was a rhythmic back and forth, a collision of intent that felt like a physical weight lifting from his shoulders. He stopped checking the clock. He stopped worrying about the next swipe. The interface between them dissolved, leaving only the words that bridged the distance. He typed, she countered, and the cycle accelerated, pulling them both into a shared space that demanded their full, undivided attention. The apartment darkened as the hours bled into one another. Outside, the city noise faded to a distant, rhythmic hum, but inside, The screen remained a vibrant, constant beacon. Ethan moved from his desk to the window, then to the floor, tethered to the device by the relentless stream of thought. He had never experienced this kind of mental friction, where every idea he presented was met with a challenge that sharpened his own resolve. He forgot to drink water. He forgot to check the time. The silence of the apartment was no longer empty. It was filled with the weight of their exchange. He watched the shadows stretch, then retreat, as the first gray light of dawn began to bleed through the blinds. He looked at the phone and saw the battery icon dipping into the red, yet he felt no urge to plug it in. The alignment was total. It was a resonance he had sought for years, only to find it in the quietest hours of the night. He stood up, his legs stiff from the long, immobile stretch, and walked toward the window. The sky was turning a pale, bruised violet. He realized he was no longer searching for a match. He was standing in the middle of a foundation. The cafe was quiet, a stark contrast to the digital intensity of the night. Ethan pushed the door open, the bell above it chiming once before the sound was swallowed by the hum of the espresso machine. He saw her at a small table near the window. She was not looking at her phone. She was watching the door. He walked over, the space between them closing with a weight that felt tangible. There was no hesitation, no performance. He pulled out the chair and sat. They did not order immediately. They did not reach for menus. The air between them held the residue of their conversation from the night before, and they leaned into it without needing a warm-up. He looked at her, noting the absence of the digital buffer. This was not a date designed for display. It was a meeting of intent. She spoke first, her voice steady, cutting through the ambient noise of the shop. Every word she uttered was a direct continuation of their shared logic. Ethan felt the last of his skepticism dissolve. They were not two strangers attempting to impress. They were two people clearing away the debris of their pasts to see if the foundation held. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, and listened. The world outside the window lost its relevance. They left the shop and merged into the rhythm of the park. The pavement stretched ahead, lined with trees that offered no distraction from the intensity of their pace. Ethan watched the way she navigated the path, her stride matching his own, neither of them slowing for the sake of comfort. She asked a question about his past failures, not out of curiosity, but to probe the architecture of his decision-making. He answered, then immediately turned the lens back on her, questioning her stance on compromise. The air between them crackled with the friction of two minds colliding. They walked past the fountain, then the empty playground, their focus entirely locked on the logic of their exchange. There was no filler, no polite laughter to soften the edges of the truth. Every point they raised was a test, a deliberate strike against the other's convictions to see if the structure held firm. Ethan felt a sharp, electric jolt with each passing minute. It was terrifying to find someone who saw the world with such brutal clarity. They were not just talking, they were stress-testing a future. When she countered his argument, he did not retreat. He leaned into the challenge, his heart rate climbing, realizing that for the first time, he was not looking for a mirror, but for a partner who could hold her own against the weight of his own growth. The rhythm broke on a Tuesday. They were in the kitchen when a comment about a project schedule landed wrong. It was not a grand betrayal, but a misalignment of priorities that hit like a physical blow. Sophia stopped mid-sentence. Tear in the room thickened, turning cold and stagnant. Ethan felt his pulse jump, the familiar itch of his old habits clawing at the back of his mind. He pulled his hand away from the counter, his fingers curling into a tight fist. His immediate reaction was to retreat, to find the door and vanish, before the friction could burn them both. He looked at the floor, his jaw locked hard, measuring the distance to the exit. He felt the weight of every past failed interaction pressing down on his chest. It was the same trap he had navigated for years, the urge to discard anything that did not move in perfect sync with his own pace. Sophia stood still, her gaze fixed on him, waiting to see if he would hold his ground or fold into his own defense. The silence stretched, vibrating with the threat of collapse. For a heartbeat, the progress of the last few weeks teetered on the edge of a total break. He was standing at the threshold of his old life, staring at the handle of the door, terrified of the instability that honesty had invited into his world. Ethan's hand hovered over the door handle. He could leave. It would be easy. But then Sophia spoke, her voice steady and stripped of all pretense. "Do not turn away," she said. "Tell me exactly what you fear." He froze, then released the handle. The metal clicked, a final sound in the quiet kitchen. He turned back, his muscles still coiled, and pulled out a wooden chair. She sat across from him. There was no coffee, no distraction, just the hard reality of their opposing views. He began to speak, his voice rasping at first, then growing firm as he articulated the frustration he had been holding back. He did not sugarcoat the resentment. She listened, her posture rigid, then countered with her own perspective, point by point. They did not interrupt. They did not raise their voices. They held the space between them until the sharp edges of the argument began to dull. Every sentence was a brick removed from the wall they had inadvertently built. When he finally stopped, the room felt different. The air was clear, stripped of the static that had defined the last hour. He looked at her, seeing the fatigue in her eyes, and realized the conflict had not broken them. It had tested the integrity of their bond. They had chosen the hard path of presence over the easy path of exit. It was their first real victory. The seasons turned, and the frantic pace of their early days dissolved into the steady rhythm of a shared life. Years later, the porch light cast a soft amber glow over the wooden floorboards. Ethan sat back, his weight resting against the railing, watching the shadows stretch across the lawn. The air was still. There was no need for constant conversation or the desperate scramble for alignment that had defined their beginnings. They sat in the silence, comfortable and unhurried. The grand gestures they once thought necessary had long since been replaced by the quiet, daily work of showing up. He looked at the neighborhood, the same trees, the same quiet street, but everything felt anchored by a weight that had not been there before. Sophia leaned against the pillar, her attention focused on the fading sunset. There was a profound lack of friction in the space between them. Every disagreement they had navigated had acted as a stone in a foundation, building something that did not shift when the wind picked up. The intensity of their discovery phase had matured into a deep, predictable stability. He took a slow breath, feeling the cooling air on his face, and realized that the uncertainty which once haunted his nights had completely vanished, replaced by the quiet, unbreakable proof of their consistency. Sophia turned, her gaze settling on him with a curiosity that had not dulled over the years. She tapped the arm of her chair, her voice soft in the evening air. Looking back, what was the real turning point? She asked. Was it luck? Or did we just find the right algorithm? Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen remained dark, a flat piece of glass reflecting the porch light. He turned it over in his palm, feeling the weight of the metal and the memory of the man who once stared at it with such desperation. He looked at the device, then back to her. It was never about the app, he said, his voice steady. He set the phone down on the small table between them, letting it slide slightly across the wood. The app was just a tool, a mirror. The work happened long before I ever sent that first message. He watched her expression, seeing her wait for the rest. He realized that for years, he had been waiting for the world to deliver the right person to his door. He had been a passive observer of his own life, hoping for a miracle to solve his loneliness. He shook his head slowly. The secret was not the search, he continued. It was the moment I stopped hunting for someone else to complete me, and finally decided to become the person who could sustain a connection like this. He looked out at the garden, watching the way the evening light caught the leaves. The change had not been a sudden epiphany, but a slow, deliberate erosion of his old habits. He had stopped treating his life like a waiting room and started treating it like a construction site. Every honest conversation with himself had been a brick. Every boundary he set, every value he defined, had been a layer of mortar. He turned to Sophia, noting the way she watched him, her presence a constant in a world that had once felt fragmented. It was never about finding a perfect match in a crowded digital space. It was about becoming the person who could recognize, hold, and nurture a connection when it finally appeared. They had not stumbled into this life by accident. They had built it. Each day was a choice, a small, quiet commitment to stay present, to listen, and to grow through the friction of being two separate people choosing to move in one direction. He leaned back, the weight of the years behind them feeling not like a burden, but like a foundation. The screen on the table remained dark, its purpose long since fulfilled. He realized that the greatest success was not the match itself, but the person he had become along the way. One honest day at a time, they had created something that would last.